We would like to welcome Cherie Thame, who will moderate a panel discussion sponsored by the Marcus Foundation around building sustainable communities through collaboration.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today? End of a conference. Everyone doing well? We're still awake, excited? Well, we have a great panel here today. We're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves first. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cherie Thame. I am the Chief of Programs and Initiatives with America's Warrior Partnership. And it's my honor to be on a panel with these fine folks today. So we'll go and introduce yourself and tell folks a little bit about what you currently do.
Everybody, my name is Blaine Smith, and I am the Director of Health and Wellbeing Programs at the George W. Bush Institute. I'm an Army veteran. I served on active duty from 2001 to 2010. Had the privilege of serving in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I've met a lot of folks in this room in various capacities in the veteran space. I was the first executive director at Team RWB back from 2012 to 2017 and did a lot of conferences like this back then. And since that time, I've had the privilege of working with some great organizations like the Headstrong Project, the Green Beret Foundation, and for the last 6 years, the George W. Bush Institute.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tammy Bartlett. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs for Student Veterans of America. I'm a Coast Guard veteran, served 8 years, was in the Persian Gulf in 1998 aboard the Coast Guard Cutter Chase. At SVA, we are all about supporting that to, through, and beyond mission of higher education. As Vice President of Government Affairs, I get to advocate on the Hill for the GI Bill, talking to our friends at VA, Department of Education, and the Department of Labor, ensuring that the benefits go to those transitioning service members and those military-connected students, and that the benefits are there for them to use.
So my name's Dennis Weimer. I am the current president of the National Association of State Directors of Veterans Affairs. As part of that, other hat, though, I am the director of the Indiana Department of Veterans Affairs. Air Force veteran. I've worked in multiple public sector, private sector, nonprofit, college education areas in my career, which means I have a career attention deficit disorder. So I need to pop around a little bit, which aligns with my 2 years of moving every 2 years in the military. So, but I've worked in a wide array of different areas. And for the last 5 years, I've been a pleasure an honor to work for the governor of Indiana in this role.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Schmigel. I'm a 20-year retired Marine. Always start with that. Where Jim Lorraine always says, if a Marine doesn't tell you he's a Marine in 10 seconds, he's not a Marine, or she. I am the co-founder and CEO of a service-disabled, veteran-owned business, social impact consulting firm called Zero Mills. And our mission is to create military thriving, not military friendly or ready, but military thriving cultures and communities.
So I'm going to pose a question to the team to start this, or to the panelists, to start this discussion. I'd like you to define what community means to you. We'll start with you, Blaine.
So I tried to come up with a good definition for this, but I've failed. So I'm going to just offer one word and then maybe an anecdote for my definition. I think the word that keeps coming to my mind is interdependency. And I think that's something that we all could think more about as it relates to community, especially within the veteran space. And what I mean by that is this. You really can't be in community with somebody or a number of people if you don't rely on one another and support each other in a variety of ways. And I think about, the middle-class neighborhood that I live in, and there's all these nuclear families essentially isolated in their houses from one another, and every dad owns all the tools, and every house has a swimming pool. And it occurred to me a couple of years ago that, if you have something you need to do in your yard, I'd like you to show up at my house and ask for help. And maybe I could do the same for you so that we don't have to spend all of our discretionary income on hiring people to come do this stuff. Or if you need a tool to do something, maybe don't run out to Home Depot immediately and grab it. Maybe come over and I've got it, or vice versa. Or send your kids over to jump in my pool if it's 95 degrees outside. And I think as it relates to the veteran community, this is particularly important because so many of us we want to be helpers. We want to do things for our fellow veterans. We want to do things for our communities and have that sense of service. And I totally appreciate that. But I think if you can't do that in a kind of a symbiotic relationship where you have some interdependencies, you're going to really miss out on the point of all of that. And so we end up being these super helpers that want to save everybody and do everything, but we struggle until we really, really need it sometimes to really rely on one another. And I think that's really kind of what it comes down to. You can't really have a community if you don't have true interdependency, and that takes both a willingness and an ability to offer help, but also an ability to ask for it and to share in that. And I think AWP and other organizations in this room are really getting that as it relates to our space. But for me, that's really what it comes down to. What is the likelihood that if you need help moving tomorrow, somebody's going to show up at your house? Or what is the likelihood that that request is going to come your way? And for me, that's the proxy. That's the litmus test. Like it's a yes or a no. Are you buying pizza and beer for people moving boxes at your house or not? That would be my test of whether or not there's real community.
Well, Blaine, I think you also touched on a very important point when you're talking about that, is the not needing to duplicate. So in the example that you gave, if someone can come help me do this so I don't have to hire, they may have an expertise in an area that you don't. And so I think that's a huge point that you brought up, and I think we should talk about that later on. But the duplication, and we all have our expertise in what we do, and what our hats are doing. And we have wonderful partners that have expertise in areas that we don't, and don't recreate, the wheel if we can do that. So thank you. Tammy?
For me, I will say a community comes in waves and looks different. It just appears different. Wearing my public health hat, you have your intrapersonal, you have your interpersonal, you have your local community, and you have your community at large. And as far as student veterans, transitioning onto a college campus where majority of the traditional students are not your age, they're maybe the age of your own children, trying to figure out your community on campus can be difficult because you may relate more to the faculty members than you do the students in your group that you're trying to work with. So at SVA, we push for that peer community, and not just student veterans, but we want to include everyone. So student veterans, military-connected student members, their families, caregivers and survivors, and the allies too, because those traditional students may have a family member that also served, and so they feel that connection to the veteran population. And so with the community that's grown on campuses, that filters out into those communities that the campuses are within. It may be, for example, when I was at Temple, I belonged to the Temple Community Choir. So not only were we students, but it was faculty members and people from the community who just loved to sing and come in, and we had that time together. Oftentimes, courses and programs will take students out into the communities to help better the communities that the campuses are within. And so I feel, as far as student veterans, community starts on campus and then filters out through. Through SVA, one of our strongest programs is our Washington Week, where we want those student veterans, military-connected students, family members, dependents, survivors, allies, our SVA members to come to DC to tell their stories to their members of Congress, to share what they are doing in their communities back home, and to share what those gaps and challenges they're facing, and how those members of Congress can help back in their districts.
So when I started this role about 5 years ago, the mission of our organization was we serve those veterans who are eligible for our benefits. Not a very good mission. If you're not eligible, okay, I'm not here to serve you. So we worked with as a team to change our mission. The mission started off as support, serve, and advocate for Indiana veterans, their families, and caregivers. And we liked that. That was nice and all-encompassing. One of my staff came to me and said, what if we change that last part to be the Indiana veteran community? And so then we had to define of what that meant, because we were going to put money where our mouth was on that mission. And for us, the community that we serve are those veterans, are our Guard, reservists, are those families, their caregivers. But then also, and this is where it hits, is that AWP is a part of that community. The organizations that serve other veterans have to be part of our customers, have to be part of who we as a state entity are going to serve. And because if, to your duplication effort, if we serve them, we're gonna impact more veterans than we could ever do on our own. And so we spent a lot of time defining what that community is, how we define that. And my predecessor, I love him dearly, but his mindset was, I can't work with you as a nonprofit because then I'd have to work with everybody. My thought is, why can't I work with everybody? Just, it may be in a different way. So for us, it's all encompassing. And that last part of one of my staff coming up and challenging something that I was thrilled with, I really liked it. And he helped us change, and it's meant the world for us, because now we have so many more partners and our community is much larger and we can do so much more. And so for us, it's that whole connectivity across the state for us to be able to work and help that group do better.
And that breaks down barriers, doesn't it? And it opens up the dialogue with the community at large, and then the population of the veterans and family members as well.
Especially when you bring money.
That helps.
Okay, I was just going to say one word because we joked about this before we prepared. I would say this. If someone asked me to describe community, I would say this, what's in this room today. Of course, I'm not going to end there. So I was an English literature major, and words matter. I believe actions matter more. But I went and looked it up on the Oxford Dictionary. The definition of a community: a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. I see three words in there: fellowship. There is no stronger fellowship or sense of camaraderie or brotherhood or sisterhood than the military and veteran connected community. I see the word commonality and shared experience, shared trials and triumphs and struggles and strengths. And then the connection piece, and I think everyone touched on that. Like, there is such an amazing connection and interdependence in a community. So I think it's the most vital thing we're doing. I think that the fact that you're all in the room, you can talk about communities of geographies and guys like Jesse and Roy, someone like Nikki Falzone from Platoon 22, all these local communities that are represented, but also communities of interest. So just like our whole lives are defined by communities, and without them, we're not stronger. There's this, when I was a lieutenant in the Marine Corps, Ola, you might have been around when the General Jones, one of my mentors in the Marine Corps, the Commandant's reading list was a Jungle Book. I'm like, the Jungle Book? I read that. It's one of my favorite books by Rudyard Kipling. Again, as an English literature major, I love the written word. Why did General Jim Jones put the Jungle Book on the reading list? The strength of the wolf is the pack. The strength of the pack is the wolf. That's the only reason he put it on there, but it's so true. The strength of our community is every single person in here. And I saw that in the Marine Corps over 20 years, the strongest community I've ever been a part of, the proudest moment of my life. It was, besides being a dad and a husband and a son to a Marine, and also the father of a Marine too. But that community, there's nothing like it. It'll never be replicated. And I thrive more in that life than ever before, because of the community. But the same thing with hiring our heroes and the community that's been built here. When we started hiring our heroes, it was all about a community, not one person. It was about guys like Mike Kelly, who was there at the very beginning, Steve Robinson, an Army Ranger, who literally worked himself to death at his desk because he cared so much about getting veterans jobs. Avery King from HCA, who passed away recently. I can go on and on and on, but it was those community of leaders that made change. At Operation Gratitude, 1 million volunteers, community. And then you look around the room today, the communities of interest that were here. Dog Tag Bakery, you heard. Like all of these organizations making a difference, but it's all about the connections between the people who share those commonalities. I think that's really the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway. You knew I wouldn't just say one word.
I'm watching the clock.
How'd I do?
3.5 minutes.
All right, I was average.
No, that was good. So we've talked about communities, like you guys defined your community, and thank you for that. The other part about community that you all touched on as well is when we create the community, we all know that veterans, with surveys we've done and military family, they want to continue their service afterwards. Like that's giving to their community, that's volunteer, that's recreational activities, it's purposeful, meaningful things that they want to do. And when we establish our partnerships and our communities, we're also opening that space for our veterans to be able to give back and do that in our communities. And I think oftentimes we don't think about that. I think oftentimes when we do think about communities, we think about, okay, what partners do we need to bring to the table? What are our veterans needing? And how can we connect them to that? But I think there's another part of that happens when we do build our communities. So let's talk a little bit about duplication. I would like to do that a bit and hear you guys' thoughts on duplication. If there was a story you want to talk about where you want to share around duplications of efforts, I'd be interested in hearing that.
Sure, I can go. I mean, I think there's a big difference between redundancy and duplication. And what I mean by that is like, as a good Army SF guy, I was taught to believe that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So I like having a robust set of resources to do any one thing. But I think where we get really twisted at times in the social space is when it comes to credit. And some of the best work I've ever seen done throughout the entire veterans community is when organizations come together and they share, the word share keeps coming up, and they share in a common cause and they don't care a lot who gets the credit because their focus is on the end user or on the veteran or the family member. And I think where we really can run afoul sometimes is when we all have our own organizations that we're living, kind of hand to mouth. We're trying to raise money. We're trying to demonstrate efficacy of our programs. And we've got to do this in a way that allows us to continue providing this vital service. And this is where I think we all, need to help each other out a little bit, is that if we have a constant reminder of what is we're trying to achieve together, and we have our eye kind of on the customer, so to speak, we can do really impressive things together if we don't care a whole lot who gets the credit in the short term. And this has just been my experience. I've been doing this work for 10 or 12 years. The organizations and the individuals who have been generous, who have been gracious, who have taken the long view of these things and have kept their focus on really helping the community are the people that are in rooms like these, because they've had the right focus. And over time, it becomes pretty small. You see all the organizations out there and everyone talks about 40,000 veteran serving nonprofits. It's actually a pretty small community. And for those who are able to keep that focus, they have a strong reputation. They get to work with you again, and we can build really lasting things together. I'll give you just one example. At the Veteran Wellness Alliance, which is an entity that I help lead, we have a project called Check-In, and nobody owns it. It's sort of the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So if you go to veterancheckin.org, you can connect yourself or someone you care about to really high quality mental and brain health. And if you look around on the website, it's hard to figure out who owns it because nobody does. It's a collaboration between Wounded Warrior Project, who is a behemoth and has no need to collaborate with any one of us if they don't need to, through IVMF, who's done an amazing job over the last 10 years, through us at the Bush Institute, through Combined Arms down in Houston, and through 17 other organizations that either connect people to care or provide that care. And all those organizations are somewhere on the website, but literally nobody owns it. And look, I'll be honest, I've got to figure this out over the next couple of years is what we're going to do with that. But the reason that we've gotten 2,000 people connected to care is because people just decided to chip in and be a part of it because it was the right thing to do. And we're now 4 years on and we still haven't sorted out the 501c3 or the board or any of those things. And so, yeah, we will. But for now, we're serving veterans and military family members, and I think that's pretty unique.
At SVA, we've come to realize that we cannot be everything for everyone. We have over 1,600 chapters here in the United States and some overseas, because some individuals use their GI Bill abroad, and 750,000 chapter members. And we understand that everyone has unique needs and challenges and barriers that they face. So when we do our community projects and our regional summits, which we're doing over the summer right now, it's the opportunity to reach those new chapter leaders who come into these new roles, because oftentimes their chapters will begin in the fall. And we teach them to do funding and budgeting, how to do a meeting, how to talk to the provost of the university. But our programming always starts with a community project, and is always with a veteran serving organization that we have a relationship with. And it's a different one just about every time. From the Mission Continues to Team Red, White, and Blue, Team Rubicon, Travis Manion Foundation, because those are the ones that have the boots in the ground in those communities and can understand the needs of that community. And understanding that those chapter members then can go back in their communities and seek out organizations just like that to continue a mission. Here in the Hill, within the Beltway, as we call it, as far as programs and services, we may see some duplication with a lot of the larger VSOs, but the program may be the same with the same objection, but the population they serve may be different. DAV versus VFW versus PVA, they're all different populations, but they all might have a program to help employment. But we all know within the Beltway here that once we gather together for a common goal, like you mentioned earlier, we can make things change. PACT Act. You saw veterans and service members up on the Hill having meetings with members of Congress, and it was never just one organization having that meeting. It was one individual from several organizations having that meeting, and there were veterans up on the Hill making that change, not one specific organization.
So duplication happens quite often when we're all leaders, we all know the way we want to have things done. And we're like, well, that group's not doing it the way I want it to be done. Or I'm not confident what they're going to do it. I don't trust, I don't know, I don't see it. So sometimes, especially in some government areas, we thought, well, we'll do it. And so one of the first things we had to do was start to trust people to be able to do the job that they're supposed to do. Hold them accountable and measure, but you have to let go of some of your own notions, some of your own ideas. There's multiple paths to get to the solution. Therefore, it's definitely different between duplication and redundancy, because you want some other redundancy in there because you needed, some people may go this path versus this path, and that's the right thing to do. But specifically when it's not your mission, or you're not, it's not something that you have the great skill sets for, but it's not being done the way you want it to be done. If the results are there, that's okay. And you got to be okay with that. And so we have, for many of you know, the Governor's Challenge to Prevent Suicide. We started to lead that, and I've seen a lot of states do great things where they formed and started to do things. And what we said was our communities defining the community as the physical local area is where the rubber meets the road, where these things are going to happen. We are not going to go in there and create new on our own that we're doing activities, but we're going to help build those that are doing that. We're giving complete control away to them, so we're not going in and duplicating any kind of effort. And we've been doing that now for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and it's been hard because some things don't do the things the way we would. As long as they're legal, ethical, and moral, that's okay. They just don't do them the way we would want to do them. But that's all right. We got to live with that, and we have to be okay with that. Otherwise, we're going to step up and go, okay, I need to do that. I need to get my hand on it. So that letting go of that control is what will help eliminate the duplication that is not needed. But there is some duplication that's needed because there's multiple different paths, and no one veteran will automatically take the exact same path or need the exact same path. So we want some of that duplication, but make sure we focus it on your skill sets, your capabilities, and don't try to do something that isn't your job.
I think there's been a lot of great points throughout the day. I think when Jim said, like, we'll focus on what we do well, you focus on what you do well. You can cut down on a lot of duplication if people have open and honest conversations about that and truly just don't talk about doing better together, but actually do it. I think egos, logos, all those things come into play. I left nonprofit work after 10 years running 3 nonprofits because I saw the opportunity to make greater change by working with multiple organizations and getting them to work together. That's really what building military thriving cultures and communities is all about. I think it's possible. I'll also take a contrarian view. I think there's a marketplace. Like, the market will bear what the market will bear. And I hate the word nonprofit. Like, it's so cliche. We're for purpose, we're for impact. And I'm running a service-disabled veteran-owned business. It doesn't matter to me that I'm not a 501c3. I'm making a greater impact doing what I'm doing now as a small business than I did when I ran a nonprofit. I ran 3 small businesses before I started Zero Mills. Doesn't mean anything. It's just a tax classification. And I'm less encumbered by running one organization at a time and getting to work with AWP and multiple other organizations, incredible organizations that are leaders in a marketplace. There was a sea of goodwill. We've talked about it all the time. And 2.5 years ago, that sea of goodwill created a narrative about our community. And there's a marketplace right now. We have choices as veterans who we work with, veterans who we buy from, veterans who we support. We have time, talent, and treasure. So there's a marketplace. If there's duplication, we choose who not to work with. Companies choose who not to work with. So I don't think duplication is bad because it'll sort itself out in the end when we make decisions about who we support, who we give our time to, our talent, and our treasure to. Same thing for employers. The way to go from military friendly to military thriving is to say to an employer, what does military friendly mean? Are you kidding me? You're doing me a favor, you're giving me a job, I'm a veteran, 3% unemployment. What are you doing to help me thrive? On the nonprofit side, if they're painting a picture that we're barely surviving when most of us are thriving, which nonprofit do you support? It's up to you. So I don't think duplication is a problem. I think we should call it out when we see it, talk to partners, and say, hey, I want to work with you, like Jim Lorraine does every day. Whether or not they do that, you can't get frustrated. There's a marketplace. The marketplace will bear what the market will bear. We just have to accept it and do what we can. Listen, there are 50 states, plus territories, that we talk about. 50 states. From the tip of Alaska, where Jesse is, all the way to the tip of Florida. From Southern California all the way to the tip of Maine. We all have a part to play. All of us. There's plenty of work for everyone to do. Remember that, because 45,000 nonprofits, 4,250, I don't get in the mix on that. I don't get in the mix. My sister lost her son to suicide. I'm not talking about this to get sympathy. I'm talking about what my sister went through. She started a small nonprofit. She does a race every year. I helped her start that nonprofit so she would get out of bed in the morning. If someone said to me, oh, your sister shouldn't do that, she's taking money from someone else, I said, I don't care. She found purpose and hope and showed other people purpose to hope. So I think duplication is okay. Let's embrace it and let us decide, us, what the market will bear.
So what I hear you guys saying, so it's quality versus quantity, which a couple of the panelists have talked about in previous sessions throughout yesterday and today. And then there was a theme amongst the three of you. Tammy, you talked a lot about like, there's a bit of vulnerability that you have to do to be like, I can't do all things for all people. And so I'm going to have these partnerships that can do those things for the individuals that are needed. And that takes a bit of vulnerability, which you also hit on, Dennis, when you were talking about, I could do this better maybe, or I don't trust you. You know, we have to open ourselves up to give folks the opportunity to do a good service, or to be a good partner and be a part of our communities and thrive. And then Blaine, you when you were talking about Tom Dearline talked about taking credit, and you were mentioning that as well. It's like, you know, a lot of times, most times, like, why do we need to take credit? If you have an idea and you have a partnership and it's working, what does it matter if you take credit? At the end of the day, you're serving, you know, a person, a family, a community, whatever that is, and who cares who came up with it? Me personally, I don't care who came up with it, if it works, right? And so all of these things that you guys have talked about, these are barriers and challenges that as human beings we do when we're doing any type of relationship, community or otherwise. And I think that was a great discussion around that. I want to take a few minutes, if you guys have an example of a partnership that's at an outcome, like where you leverage certain partners to do and support a person. Do any of you guys have an example that like stands out that you would like to share?
A couple of years ago, got a phone call from one of our counties and said, hey, we've got a problem here. In the last 88 days, we've had 8 veterans die by suicide. In the last 2 years, we've had 5 total. They went on through the year and had 16 throughout the year. There was something going on in that community. And they couldn't get the local government folks to participate. They couldn't get them to really be a player. And so I just said, okay, fine, what do we need to do? How do we need to do it? And we started to pull people together. My job was to pull them together, but then I let it go and give it to the local leader, and then supported her to lead through that organization. And over the last 2.5 years, that has fallen back and reduced, but it came to bear last week when I got a phone call from a friend who said, I don't know what to do. My friend's daughter just tried to commit suicide last night. She's in a stress center. I don't know what to do. She's part of that community. And immediately called a couple people. I've now working to transfer that over to some partnership with AWP on it, and said, let's make it happen. And we had that community through that work we've been doing, knows each other, is connected, and immediately we had contact with the mother, and we had the array of things, both federal, state, local, nonprofit organizations, churches, ready and able to serve that person. Ideally, we'd like to figure out how we can get to them beforehand, but that's not always the case. But it happened within moments that we were able then to take the one phone call to me by someone who I met at the Indy 500 racetrack once as he was a bartender, and gave him my cell phone number, and he called me up and said, I don't know what to do. To then we have this whole partnership in place, ready to rock and roll, and it's continuing to work on the front end. So this just happened within the last week. So difficult that we had to do that, but honored that we were able to do that.
I think there are a ton of examples out there, especially during COVID.
Pick one.
Well, Veterans for Vaccinations, there was a whole coalition of veteran organizations that got together and helped with vaccinations across the country. I see those things happening all the time at the community level. I see private sector-led stuff too. I mean, public-private collaboration is important. Dave Lee, Operation Stand Down, Tennessee, Dave Lee and CVS Health brought a bunch of nonprofits to Tennessee to talk about the things that companies and nonprofits could work on together. I think there's a question about whether or not change is always led by nonprofits, or sometimes companies stand up and say, it's time to lead change too. Those collaborations with funders can be facilitated if companies and leaders like Dave, USAA, others who are in the room say, hey, we'd like to bring nonprofits together. Resources do an amazing thing to smaller nonprofits and communities when you can encourage collaboration. And then there's abundance versus scarcity. Like, there's opportunities for nonprofits all to do well. There's a great book by Stephen Covey. Every nonprofit leader should read it. If you believe in abundance, you believe that if you work together, those companies, those foundations, those high net worth individuals are going to give all of you more money because they're realizing synergies, efficiencies, efficacies. So, like, there's tons of examples. We just have to be more deliberate. Same thing about a marketplace. It'll bear it if everyone works together and proves the model. And AWP does it too. It's really there. We just have to do it more.
Yeah. I can give a really specific example. From a long time ago, there was a guy named Eric in Charlotte, North Carolina, that had joined Team RWB, and he was a below-the-knee amputee and was really kind of in a bad way when he first joined the organization. And there was a stretch of time, a number of months, where he was coming out all the time, participating in everything. We saw Eric all the time. And candidly, he was an awesome example of a Team RWB member because he was out in his red shirt, doing PT, involved in the community, overcoming his challenges, and it was an amazing story. And over time, and this is where you need to be really careful, and I think abundance is a great word to use here. We need to be really careful about how we measure our own success and how we look at it, because over time, Eric's participation started to dip a little bit in the local chapter, and the local chapter was smart to say, hey, what's going on with Eric? We've not seen him around as much. And so, I called him up and started talking to him a little bit about what was going on in Eric's life, and it turned out that Eric had joined a CrossFit gym, and he was crushing it. And he was in a PhD program at UNC Charlotte, and he had started working with the SVA folks. And Eric also had a girlfriend now. And so I got back to our folks and I said, hey guys, call off the search party for Eric. He's doing just great, because now he's doing clean and jerks and going on dates and getting a PhD. Like, yeah, Eric's not coming around anymore. So what? It's fine. Like, we worked ourselves out of a job with Eric. Let's go find another person to help. And I think that's the kind of story that we aspire to have with everybody that we serve. And if we can get out of our own damn way sometimes, we're going to have a lot more of those. And to Kevin's point, like, there's no shortage of work to do here, guys. So let's not latch on to these things so tightly and feel like it matters so much in these individual cases. Let's do a good job and pat ourselves in the back if we have, and move on to the next thing, because there's plenty to do.
One more story about Jim Lorraine. So Linda Davis is here. Jim Lorraine and I didn't even know each other until like 4 or 5 years ago, and Linda introduced us. Jim Lorraine showed up when I was at Operation Gratitude, and he was volunteering with us because he knew that's what we did well, and he helped bring the community of Augusta together. He didn't have to do that. So when Jim Lorraine says he's going to do it, he's not just talking. He did it. That's why I work with Jim. I don't tell that story to anyone. I don't have to. He showed up, I show up. That's what partners do. And he got benefit from it. He did. Like, we can create win-win-win scenarios if the public, private, nonprofit sectors work together and no one cares about egos and logos and who gets the credit. We're going to say these things again and again. Words don't matter to me. It's about actions. So again, you choose who you want to work with, and it makes it a lot easier. I guarantee you, if you think about it, you're a nonprofit leader and you do this, you're going to benefit. And I know Team RWB does it. There are lots of examples. If you take it and you act on it and it doesn't work because you collaborate, come see me. I'll give you 100 hours of free consulting to show you, if it didn't work the first time, how it can work the second time and third time. It doesn't mean that you should accept failure, because it will work. I've seen it.
So I have 3 quick examples. My first example is when SVA had a need. We found ourselves last year transferring telephone companies, and we're going from a telephone provider that when you would call our line, you would get a computerized voice, you would have to push a certain button or the extension. And it was just something that we no longer wanted to provide. We wanted to provide a real person on that other side of the line. So we got with AWP, and they connected us with Vets for Warriors, and now we have a call center 24/7 of veterans and military spouses who are there to help anyone who calls SVA's phone number. And then I get a little email every day, and anything that has to do with policy or government affairs, I have the person's name, their email, their voice, their cell phone number, and the reason they called. So that's when we had a need and found it through our Partners to Fulfill. Earlier today, I was speaking to Greg. I don't even know if he's here anymore. There he is. And so we were talking about his program, and he had mentioned his need for his program is transportation. I have a friend who works for a nonprofit who provides transportation to veterans to go to rehabilitation facilities or to outdoor programs. So that's one way. My friends usually call me a bumblebee because I swear I know everybody. But I'm able to make that connection. And lastly, this one was a need for myself. So many years when I was a student veteran, I felt that even though I was now identifying as a veteran, there was still something missing. And as being in the Coast Guard, it was being on the water. And so I connected with a group called Team River Runner out of Philadelphia and got kayaking as soon as I could. And it was just a few months ago that a student veteran here in the DC area connected with the Sierra Club and is doing one of their fellowships. And so he and I were just chatting over one day at Washington Week about what he's doing with the Sierra Club, and I mentioned, oh, I love kayaking. Well, on Saturday, the Sierra Club, Team River Runner, and SVA members here in the DC area were all going kayaking. So that's a way, you can help someone else with a personal need or your company's need or your nonprofit's need, but then the networks you make here in these organizations and at these lunches, I try to, when I attend these things, even with my fellow employees, I try to have lunch at a different table than my other employees. I see them and can talk to them anytime, but I often don't get to see and connect with you all.
So I'd like to tell a story. And I'm going to steal, this is one of my favorite ones about partnerships. And I'm going to steal it from Scott Johnson. Scott, are you in here? All right. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago during the SEC football game that was going to be in Mercedes-Benz Championship, and they wanted to give a free car to a veteran. And Scott, if you haven't met him, he's with the Warrior Alliance out of Atlanta. And he had a female veteran who was unemployed, was either homeless or about to become homeless, that they wanted to put forward to kick this field goal and win this car. So Scott's out there teaching her how to kick a field goal. She doesn't do it. You either had a professional NFL person out there teaching her. She never makes a single one. Then the day before the game, and she's supposed to kick this field goal, and she hasn't even ever made it, she breaks her arm. She goes out there, kicks the field goal, and makes it. So what happens when you win a car? You got tax, title, license, all the things. She didn't have that. So Scott reached out to community partners, and you were able to get some money to go towards that. Scott reached out to AWP Network, who reached out to Tom Dearline, who did a match, and to Gary Sinise Foundation, they did a match. So you had 2 national nonprofits plus local nonprofits to fund this for her to be successful and being able to obtain her vehicle and work towards her quality of life. And that is one of my favorite stories to tell. It's better when Scott does it, but I wanted to share that story. So I want to give time for folks to ask questions. So I'm going to do a brief. If there's any lasting things that you want to say before we open it up to questions. Good? Okay. All right. I can take questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions? What, did Blake leave? No questions?
Can I just say one thing real quick? I want to call out Tom Derline and Jason. I had a bad day yesterday. So I really do think it was so inspirational to hear those two speakers today. Like, if we think about our own bad days and you think about the two men that stood up and talked about getting from a bad day to thinking about leading always and living greatly, we can only lead so much and we can only be so great. And all of you are making a difference. And when I think about what Tom did and what he's doing, one veteran family at a time, and what Jason is doing, that's what I want my life to be about, because I've been in a pretty dark place. And I remember what that was like, going from surviving to thriving. And I think when you hear those stories, we're all going to be in that place. And that's the strength of our community, to lift each other up. Those two people really changed my trajectory today just by sharing their stories. So I would ask that you all as a community think about that narrative and that's out there about us, because we all struggle. After 2 decades of war, it's not surprising. But I think the broken narrative has done a good job. The sea of goodwill that paints this picture that we're broken and victimized, that pendulum has swung way too far. And I know we need to provide services, but when you spend 98% of your time talking about 2% of the people who are struggling, rather than focusing on spending some of your time on the 98% that are thriving, it's time to change the narrative. And we own it. So our community has to stand up and be heard. That's as simple as that. I'm not saying that we can't talk about the struggles, but we need to do a better job talking about our community as thriving, because it's worked. 9% of young people are willing to serve. 62% of young people, according to DOD, think we all have a psychological disorder. That's a problem. If you haven't looked at the stats on recruiting, it's a problem. So we own it. It's on us to get in front of young people and show them that despite the challenges, despite men like Jason and Tom who faced unimaginable challenges, look at what they're doing. That makes the case even stronger that this community is the community that you want to work with, that you want to work for you, that you want to give back with you, that you want to tell their story. We choose who we work with as a company. We choose the nonprofits we support, and we choose who we buy stuff from. We spend $2.1 trillion in our economy. And one other thing, there are 2.5 million veteran-owned businesses in America. 2.5 million. How many people have talked about them? Tom Derline's a small business owner. Jason Redmond is a small business owner. They have voices too. So I think we need to take ownership of it. And I know I took up a few extra minutes, but I couldn't help it.
Thank you, guys.
I just want to put one more plug in for this word community. When I think about personally and professionally, the things I've been so fortunate to be involved in across my entire life, that's the common thread in all of them. I've done nothing of any significance by myself, and I don't suspect that I ever will, but I was part of the Special Forces community. I've been a part of the Team RWB's community and Go Ruck and CrossFit. These are places that attract people like us because we have a chance to both contribute and benefit. And so, I think that's really what we need to be looking out for, is where from your neighborhood to the school system, to your town, to any of these, communities of common interest, where can you find places where you feel like you can get something that you need while also contributing something that's of value? And that, for me personally, has been absolutely everything. So I'm kind of looking at the sign here about sustainable communities through collaboration. I think that's really what it is all about. So if we can kind of lift up and look around a little bit and have an honest conversation with ourselves about what is it that I or my organization really needs right now in order to thrive, which is a great word that Kevin keeps using, and how can I make a meaningful contribution to the success of the overall whole? And I think that's a pretty good sweet spot, and there's just absolutely no shortage of places that you can do that. So keep looking, keep working at it, and the benefits are absolutely innumerable. Like, you just get so much out of taking up that disposition. So, I will be hanging out in the back and all around at dinner tonight. So if there's any way that I can help you contribute to that, then love to chat.
I also think we have a responsibility to continue the positive narrative. Sharing space and sharing our stories I often share my stories in other stages, but giving that opportunity for someone to sit in the audience and say, I felt that, I've done that. She's talking about me, and inspiring them and empowering them and supporting them on their journey to maybe have them tell their story and identify as a veteran or just an individual in their community who wants to empower and thrive and maybe join the military because they feel a calling because they had those questions and they had those thoughts very similar to yours.
I have to just say one more thing. A Gallup poll shows that a vast majority of young people want purpose, authenticity, connection, and community. Gallup, purpose, authenticity, connection, and community. Young people served after 9/11, they were the same then than they are today. We're just not getting them to the right place, and it's on us to do it. Like, we have to lead. We're veterans, and we have to lead. That's where we are. We have to create the same sort of sense of urgency that happened then, and they'll hear the calling.
At an earlier panel this afternoon, Missy from the IVMF, and Gilly, tell me if I do it wrong, said a quote that she had heard, and I think this is a great way to wrap up, and it definitely summarizes a lot of what you guys are saying. She said, if you want to get somewhere fast, go by yourself. If you want to get somewhere sustainable, go with others. And it wasn't, the words I messed up, but it was something like that. But I think that summarizes what we just did on this panel. And all of us in the partnerships. If you weren't at the pre-conference yesterday, Jim said this is like speed dating. You date everybody, meet everybody, make sure you find folks that you don't know and ask them what they do and create those partnerships. So thank you guys. Close.